welcome back to the Rabbitat Homestead. My name's Ashley. Well, today's video is part 4 of my Raising Meat Rabbits series, and we have a lot to talk about. So now that we have talked about how to care for newborn rabbits, let's talk about how to care for grow-outs. At this point, we are talking about rabbits that are at least a month old. I raise my rabbits for meat and I process them at 12 weeks old. Raising them to this age, they are called fryers, which produces a nice tender meat, but I will go into more detail about that in part 5's video. Once the kits are about 3 weeks old, you can start trying to see which ones are does and which ones are bucks. I have learned that it's better to keep checking to see which are males and females weekly, especially if I'm looking to keep one for breeding stock. In the past, I have favorited a kit and checked it at a young age thinking it's a doe and then never checked again. Then when it came time to breed, it ended up being a buck, which I had no use for at the time. So keep checking weekly, and by the time it's 8 weeks, you should know for sure. But most of the time, I'm just raising them for meat, and I don't need to know the gender until it's time to wean them. So if I have no plans to keep one or rehome one to someone, I will just wait and check them at 8 weeks when I wean them. I wean my rabbits anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks old, depending on the time of year. During the nicer times of year, spring and fall, I breed more often, so I will wean my kits at 6 weeks and breed the doe. All other times of year, I like to take it easy on my does, and I rebreed them when they are 8 weeks old, and this is also when I wean their kits. When I wean them, I separate the litter by does and bucks, and this is because by 8 weeks old, young rabbits begin to show breeding behaviors at a young age, which you do not want. So in order to tell the difference between does and bucks, you must know what to look for. Bucks will have a circular opening and does will have an opening that looks like a slit. When I wean the kits from the doe, I like to have one female kit in with the doe and then remove the kit a few days later, just to slowly wean her from nursing in case some of the kits were still nursing from her. At this point though, the kits are eating pellets, hay, and drinking water, so this step isn't necessary, but I like to do this just in case. Once the babies are weaned and separated by does and bucks in the grow-out hutch, there's not a whole lot going on between 8 and 12 weeks old. During this period of time, I just make sure that their feeders and water stay full. If you will be keeping a kit from the litter, this is a great time to handle them often, so that they will be easy to handle throughout its life. Now, just a side note, you may wonder when to take the nest box away from the baby kits. During the spring, summer, and fall, I take the nest box away at about 4 weeks old. You can take it away sooner at 3 weeks, but I like to leave it in longer, more for the mother's sake. My does like to sit on top of the nest box to get away from their kits sometimes. If you choose to keep the nest box in there, just make sure to change out the bedding often, because the rabbits could get ill as the kits will soil their box and it will become damp, which creates the perfect environment for bacteria to grow. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, which I should have mentioned in my last video, but kind of similar to chickens, when you have baby chicks, you have to check their vent and make sure that it doesn't become blocked or clogged. And that's kind of the same thing for rabbits. Now, I haven't had too many issues with this, but every once in a while, my rabbits will get kind of yucky down there, and I'll have to remove some of their droppings from their bottom. So just keep an eye out for that, especially at a younger age. The younger they are, the more prone they are to having that problem. But just make sure that you check on them. I've actually learned the hard way that I need to do this. I have lost a kit because of this situation before. So just keep an eye out for that, even as they get older and they become grow outs. Just look over your rabbits, make sure that they're healthy. And also with their eyes. I mentioned in my last video, you want to make sure that you're checking their eyes at 10 days old, making sure that their eyes are opening and removing all that crusty material away from their eyes. If you don't do that, your rabbit's eyes could be sealed shut, and then they could get infected and have nest eye, and they could actually go blind. So you don't want to have to deal with that situation. So definitely make sure that at 10 days old, that's a very important time to check on your kits. So I can't stress that enough. And then also checking their bottoms to make sure they're not getting clogged with droppings. So just keep an eye out on them, check on them often, and even as they grow and get older, make sure their eyes look good. Make sure their bottom looks good. Just make sure that they're overall healthy rabbits, and just keep an eye on them. Keep them well fed. If they're grow outs, and even any young kid, even if they're not going to be grow outs or they're going to be breeders, you can pretty much feed them as much as they'll eat, because they're growing. So you really don't have to worry about monitoring how much they eat. Just make sure to give them lots of hay. You want them to eat more hay than they do pellets, so you kind of want to train them. So try to give them, less pellets, more hay. With my grow outs, I usually just fill up their container with pellets and give them hay. But you kind of have to train them when you feed them. You definitely want them to favor hay more. It's better for their teeth and their overall health. So definitely lean more towards Timothy hay to feed them. It's healthier for them, and it will produce a much healthier meat, in my opinion.